You were highlighting for our viewers that the underlying indicator to look at that's important maybe a distinction of how you look at this relative to some others in the business is a measure of do they deserve to be reelected? And at the time, there'd been a pretty dramatic downshift for the Liberals relative to the beginning of the year, and we talked about the SNC-Lavalin scandal, etc. What have you seen in terms of how that has played out over the course of the last 4 months?
Well, what's interesting about that question is it's actually asked in two ways. So the first way is it's time for a change. And of course, we would get everybody from Alberta and Manitoba and Saskatchewan kind of going in that direction. And then we look as well as other people. But then you look and you say, the Trudeau government still has lots more work to do. It's done a good job and it deserves to be reelected. And what we've seen over the last, I'd say, 8 months or so is that number dipped down towards about the 26% on average deserves to be reelected. I mean, it fills up the tank a little bit to 30, but then it goes back down and back up again. And I have used that as a marker for the last, 15 years or so, because it tends to indicate where the vote might settle around that, as opposed to optimistic predictions that they might come back or something like that. And it was exactly the case with Kathleen Wynne, where the deserve to be reelected was around 19%, and that's where she ended up, even though she started out much higher. So I think it bears it out a little bit. When you look at the polls that have been played out during this campaign, the Liberals really haven't got above 31%. I mean, when you take the average, when you take the polls that I've done, the latest one shows the Liberals at 29%. Last week I had them at 28%. Angus Reid had them at 29%. That's the vote number. So you can see that it's hovered around that bottom end. So I think for the Liberals who were suggesting that there would be some propellant for them to get off the ground, I would remind everybody here that if you go back to the beginning of this campaign and then step back even 5 months before that, the Liberals really haven't got off the mat. I mean, they're still sitting at like 31%. What could cause it to drop down even further is turnout. I mean, that may be it. It may simply be that there are people who are much more motivated against the government to get out and vote. The other thing you and I have talked about before is you look at the youth vote versus the older vote. And the youth vote that propelled Mr. Trudeau into power now is split between the NDP and the Liberals, and that's another issue. So we still have a few days to go, but in some ways, the polling hasn't changed since I was here. The fundamentals are still in place that were there, and we're still fighting on the margins of this.
So the national numbers haven't changed a great